Hey Les, Matthew announced that he wanted to come back for another year. With him going into the last year of his contract, do you expect to adjust that or extend him at all?
I mean, right now, I think Sean mentioned earlier, similar sentiment we've chatted with Matthew with his reps. So I think that is in a very stable, let's call it situation condition. So we'll continue taking it year by year, but we definitely expect Matthew to be our QB, as he
Have you,
mentioned.
have you had conversations with Davante about a possible extension or reworking of his contract?
We on that one, we really haven't uh, chatted with his because he is under contract.
As you when we talked to you last, you said you guys would be attacking the cornerback position over the next weeks and months. Curious where you guys are now a month later at that position.
We're probably further ahead than the last time we chatted, and again, the process is obviously working through who is a Ram, who's under contract, and then at that point, working through maybe players whose contracts are expiring in the league this year, or maybe going to get cut, and then the third sequence there is the draft that will come a little later. So you're trying to work a calculus formula with those three variables.
And as you've talked about addressing free agents, but also you have guys who are now contract extension eligible. Have you made progress with Puka, Kobe, Byron, Steve, that group?
Uh, I think this is where we're at. I mean, in terms of progress, is the system that we're under usually, and we have communicated with this, is we begin with the players on our roster whose contracts are expiring, and then I think the next part of that equation is the players that are right, maybe on other teams outside of our ecosystem who will be available free agency that we're going to go through. Then at that point, you work through the draft, and then at that point, you get to the players who are under contract. That's kind of the priority and the sequence that you attack this by. And again, you do that simultaneously because the system there is a cap and we have to work within that. So we're trying to do that with uh, not just our, I call them right, the players who are rookie contract players who are newly eligible to resign. And like we mentioned, there are also players who are way beyond their rookie contract, who are under contract as well, that you have to work through.
Thank you.
Geary.
Hey, Les.
Hey, Gary.
You guys in the past, like the recent past, have come up extended guys before free agency began. Not necessarily the group. We're not talking about the 2023 class, but guys that are could be pending free agents have signed before free agency even officially began. Do you anticipate one or more guys doing that this year with you, coming back with to you guys?
I do not anticipate that. And I was thinking, Gary, historically, and you probably have the examples on the top of your head. Uh, Usually the case, and especially the way the system works and how the calendar works. Uh, I know historically, you're this time of year, it's usually the players who, right, are probably just hitting free agency for you. Their contract just expired. And then at that point, naturally and sequentially in the calendar, you move to those outside of your building. And then usually you move to the players that are under. We've talked about this a lot. A lot of times because the players whose contracts are expiring have expired, or at least on Wednesday become official. There's a there's a deadline where with the others there's not, so those are usually a longer process.
Would you do you want Kobe Durant, Roger McCreary back?
I think right now we're working through those scenarios, and in the case too, it's interesting this time of year because a lot of players who have gotten to this point, they're it's probably a win-win that okay, you those players can go and let's call it explore the market, because if that way they get a feel for what their market is. It's not a subjective, speculative market at that point. So it's I think Sean probably mentioned it. It's an interesting time because maybe players are talking with other teams about moving on. But at the end of the day, what everyone's trying to do is figure out a monetary, real market value. That up until the bell rings is all speculative.
And with Kam Curl, does the fact that you guys extended Quentin Lake make it less likely that you would have Kam back
I
on
mean, I
a?
think the answer would be no, based on because they play the same position but two different positions in terms of Lake's ability to play star. So that's why that's why I answered it that way.
Mhm. And then I know this decision doesn't have to be made for a couple months, but in terms of Emmanuel Forbes and a fifth-year option, where are you guys at in terms of your thinking on whether to exercise that or not?
We've discussed it. We probably, because it's not as urgent a matter of as working through the start of next week,
Mhm.
truly finalized and made a decision on that.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Hey, thank you.
Adam.
Hey, Les, just to circle back to one of Sarah's questions, when you say you're going to take it year to year with Matthew, that's been the approach the last couple of years. But so would that preclude a potential contract extension this offseason?
That doesn't preclude that. I think that when we say year to year, I think it's a lot bigger than contract. It's us working with Matthew working with us based, and really it's all based on, hey, does Matthew as an individual want to continue uh, doing what it takes to be elite in this league? And you know what's interesting? We've kind of said that. I think the handshake is take it year to year so that he can kind of focus right on the 2026 mountain, and then we'll worry about the 27 mountain and the 28 mountain. And it's been really good. The interesting thing is, uh, as we've done that, it doesn't take long, maybe even less than 24 hours, maybe even just 48 hours or so, for him to kind of give you an inkling that, you know what, I want to climb another mountain with y'all. Uh, and then we all say, let's take a couple weeks, think on it, make sure we don't have to make that decision now. So, but that's the main thing we talk about with Matthew. We're less concerned with the contract and more concerned about him as a person, uh, because as we all know, that's he's got one of the more rewarding, fulfilling jobs on planet Earth, but one of the tougher ones.
So an extension could be possible, in other
Yeah, I
words.
mean that's. I know y'all are trying to get me to say yes or no on extension, but
Uh,
everything's possible.
okay,
Planet
perfect.
Earth, nothing's impossible.
There we go.
But that's again, I think we talk about with Matthew is more let's take this a year at a time.
Sure. Makes sense. Um, as you enter free agency next week, how do you as an organization make the distinction between this is a position we want to address in free agency and this is a position we want to address in the draft, especially in a year where you have 4 day 1, day 2 picks?
We just as you asked the question, I think the part that we don't know is here's what we knew: we identify players in the draft, but you're not necessarily certain if they're going to be there when you pick.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, our macro philosophy is if we can use free agency to not be desperate in the draft, we more than likely will be better drafters, uh, because we're not reaching, we're not desperate, we're not going in there with a major void, major hole that has to be filled. Uh, and so that's usually the approach, not always the case, but we would love to approach it where, okay, when the draft starts that Thursday night, that we could pencil in a starting lineup, a batting order, opening day batting order on paper, and then at that point in time, we could get through that game. We could be competitive in that game. We'd like to be able to say we'd have a chance to win that game more times than not, and then at that point use the draft to improve from there, but not necessarily be desperate going into the draft. Desperation will cause you to do, or there's a possibility desperation could cause you to make less than decisions in the draft.
And Kevin Dotson entering the last year of his contract, is he someone that you'd be interested in a long-term partnership with?
I know. I think the answer would be yes. I think he goes under the that umbrella, right? Players that are under contract.
Right.
It's urgent at this point. We're going to get in the next week, but I know Kevin's been really, really integral here in pass protection in the run game, basically for our offense in general. So, offensive line is something that when you have a stable, experienced, cohesive group that's worked together, that is always uh, a net positive.
Thanks, Les.
Stu.
Hey, Les, how do you view the two first round picks now that Matthew Stafford's coming back? What I mean by that is, in terms of just maximizing the time you have left with him, do you think you can get impact players with both of those picks, or would you be open to potentially moving one for a more proven player? How do you look at that?
I think both ways. Uh, both both equations are open, and you got to go through that and weigh that. But at the end of the day, we want to whatever we do with those picks or our picks or the picks we have, whether it's the first rounders, whether it's the day tours, whether it's future picks, is hey, try to use them on a player that's going to give us an edge, make an impact, as you said. We like to call it an edge. What edge does that player give this version of the Rams?
And my other question for you was just about, obviously Matthew's coming off of an MVP season, but do you feel like this is the off season because you're in a year-to-year arrangement where you potentially need to explore an avenue to find his successor, or is that not something that's been a conversation at this point?
I mean, I think I've mentioned it before. We're always right working through the scenarios where we're well aware Matthews right closer to retirement than not, but I don't say that like it's Matthew and I had a fun probably text chain even call the night Philip Rivers was playing maybe Thursday night game, and he was on date night, and I'm like, this guy's 44. So that was a joking thing. So I don't. But let's call it like it is. We've all been honest on that. But we're not desperate to, but that's always a possibility. But it's not a desperate matter.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Wyatt.
Hey, Les. Sean said earlier that you never want to reach for a need in the draft. So I'm curious, what's the thought process or the decision-making process when, you're maybe a little higher on a guy that isn't at a position of need and you're lower on a guy that is? Like, how do you kind of make that decision?
I think the philosophy behind that is if you reach for need and let's say, and we're saying we're reaching because we truly don't believe that player, right, is worthy of that pick, what have you. But there's a possibility if you reach for a need, when it's all said and done, you still have a need, but you use a draft pick on it. So so now football, right? There's a lot of players that play, uh, you know, different position groups. So for most positions, right, you can have another quality player that gives you an edge, and right, then you can use them in a rotation. You can use those players right as a tool for the good. And then we all know football there can be attrition. So when you have good players at positions, and if someone were to need a couple of weeks to get over a bump or a bruise, you're ready. You slide someone right up. So that's the macro philosophy behind that. When you say, wow, if you reach for need, there's a relatively good chance you still have a need on the other side of that pick.
And I know that you and Sean don't attend the combine, but is there anything from there that you take or that you value, in your evaluations of players?
There's a lot of things from the combine that we take and use. Even this weekend when the combine was going on, there's a lot of data, and there's a lot of data that's not necessarily just chatted about. I guess you call it Rich and Daniel chatting about what's going on in the field, 40s and things like that. There's a lot of data that comes in that we can sit internally with our analytics group and analyze that data as it goes. And now you're using that data to compare it to right draft picks past, and using those variables to help, or at least try to make better decisions moving forward. So there's plenty from the combine, that we're able to get, and it could be for us for sure, and it's more efficient being here, analyzing that data versus being there live and trying to analyze it.
Thank you.
Nate.
Hey Les, when you last time we talked to and you today too, you talked about kind of reshaping the secondary and taking a look at that group and finding ways to get better. Just kind of in general, what are you kind of looking for the group, the roster, and the team next year to have that would show you it's an improvement, short of having an all pro at every position? What would you just like to add overall to that group?
I think at the end of the day, it's all of us doing the after action review, coaching staff coming in and saying, hey, this is maybe tweaks to what we're trying to accomplish, right, on the back end from a scheme standpoint. And then at that point, determining on who our roster fits the new adjustments or tweaks. And then at that point, figuring out, like you said, is there an all pro that you could add, right? That could be nice. But if there's not an all pro, is there a player out there that adds an edge based on what we're trying to accomplish? And a lot of times, in football, you can want to improve, and you doesn't necessarily mean you let's call it, you change people. It might mean you change schemes. It might mean that, in a sense, with some people, you continue working with them, mentoring them, developing them, what have you, and they evolve from there. So that's the complex nature of our ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned that if Matthew Stafford came back, and obviously now he's back, that when you evaluate the present and the future, you'd maybe lean a little bit more to the present to maximize him. Do you have a sense of kind of what that could look like, going into free agency, or just maximizing your cap space, whether it's free agents or trades, in a way that would make you feel like you're hitting that goal?
That's what we've been doing the last couple of weeks into this week. And again, sometimes I think there's a saying I know my wife has shared with me, that the sea shapes the boat. So with that being said, knowing the market, who's available, who's not, who might be available via trade, who's getting cut, does it really happen, who gets franchised? So you got all those scenarios. Reason to say the sea shapes the boat, right? You don't necessarily know, hey, a player we might be targeting right now might resign with their own team. You got to be willing to adjust. Free agency is similar to the draft. It just is kind of going on simultaneously, where the draft's a little bit, hey, pick 1, 2, 3, 4, where it's almost like free agency. There's an element where, hey, the opening bell rings and the first, I don't know, 30, 40 players go right then. So you're having to work that simulation.
Mm-hmm. And then just lastly, when you on the topic of trades, is this a time of year where you are really exploring those or having those conversations?
This is the time of year,
okay,
for sure.
Yeah.
And I do know this. Those discussions can go on. We practiced against the Cowboys in Oxnard, and Micah Parsons was at those practices. He wasn't practicing, but he might have been opening day. He was a Green Bay Packer. I don't remember exactly when he played his first game. So yes, this is the time of year they're really picking up, because sometimes trades, you're either going to have to redo a contract or you're taking on a salary. And if it's 2 weeks after the opening bell rings, you might have already used some of your space and you can't. So that eliminates trade partners and things like that. So this is usually the most intense time, and probably even more intense than right there at the trade deadline during the season.
Thank you.
All right, we got Dennis, then we wrap up with Eric.
All right, Les.
Hey, Dennis.
How would you evaluate the 2025 rookie class as far as meeting the team's expectations?
usually I always say, and this is not a negative to them, right? Not there yet. Uh, they're rookies. I think this class, I think a lot of them, and to be honest with you, hadn't really sat down and really did the after action review, but a good bit of them contributed at some point along the way, and in different roles, and that is somewhat when we went into it. That was expected because every time we went to draft, you weren't expecting a player to have to come in and start. You were expecting that player to come in, uh, right, learn our system, earn trust, earn equity, and then make an impact from there. So I think most of them did that on a team that I would say this on a team that played very well, and we didn't have a lot of injuries, which was a rose cherry on top for the 2025 season.
Are the expectations different from for a player depending on where they're drafted, or is it all the same across the board?
I think it probably depends on the situation. Uh, I would like, as I think I mentioned earlier, uh, we would really like to ideally go into the draft and be able to say, at least on paper, if we didn't have a draft, this would be our starting lineup. And then from there, you have to then assess your depth and things like that. But I do think a competent team, uh, there there is a good probability that when you draft someone, the best thing you can do is bring that human in, have that player get adjusted as quickly as possible, so that when you do put him on the grass, because he will be getting on the grass with a very competent team with experience, and you want that player to fit right in and fit right in smoothly, and not only fit in smoothly, but ooh, there's the edge he gives. So,
All right, thank you.
Eric,
Hey, Les, thanks again for doing this. Um, how much do you evaluate other roster building projects on other teams? And then how does that help your process evolve, particularly in the NFC West, which was the best division in football last year?
yeah, that's something we definitely are aware of and look at a macro level, because you're always trying to. I think one of the toughest things, and the thing we had to be very disciplined about, is looking at what we're trying to do and how we do it, and the process we use, and how our systems working, not working, where we can get better. So sometimes that can be that can be where there, I would say your natural bias, because it's your system, can affect. That's where I meant when where we need to be disciplined when you go do that. And then there's times where you can look at what other clubs are doing, other teams are doing, and then at that point try to. Their situation's usually different, uh, with many variables, but there's always a nuance that you can pick up and appreciate what other people are doing.
And then last one for me, in terms of those two first round picks, how does whether or not you're going to use those picks, the talent in the draft pool that you're picking versus future draft talent pools, how does that affect whether or not you take somebody, move, or that kind of thing?
I think it does affect. I think the draft, again, going back to the C-shaped, the boat is not all drafts are the same, right? So I mean, it's interesting. Even when you get this time of year and you're discussing trades and you're talking about future picks, there's probably, I would say, the consensus is a future pick, you devalue it. So a fourth rounder this year is equal to a third rounder next year. But wow, just think, what if next year the draft is the deepest draft, let's call it, or one of the deeper drafts? That third round pick, that fourth round pick next year could actually be worth more than the fourth round pick this year. But that's using present day value type economic theory and all of it. But I think what you're saying is, a lot of times I say the draft is determined by who was born in and around certain years and whether they played 3, 4, 5, 6, nowadays 7, 8 years of college football, and did they decide to come out or not. So there is an element of randomness that goes into what each draft is. And then you know what? There's always that draft that's on paper considered less than, and then lo and behold, 8 years later, you're like, wow, that draft was better than advertised. I think someone sent me that tweet. There was a tweet someone sent me from the combine that going into the combine, this was considered one of the least deep drafts in a long time. And 2 days into running 40s, there's 46 first rounders. So I think that was the gist of the tweet. Sometimes the internet's funny. Every now and then you can read about yourself and go, not so funny, but that's life in 2026. That's reality. The snarky tweets that Gary tweets. Just kidding, Gary. Just kidding.
Thanks, Les.
Les, we appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Talk soon.